Welcome back to Power Lunch. About 30 minutes from now, four-time All-Star Juan Soto will be formally introduced as a New York Met at a press conference at Citi Field. Late Sunday, Soto agreed to a record-breaking $765 million 15-year contract with the Mets. And we're joined now by the agent who got the deal done. The super agent Scott Boras and CNBC.com's media and sports reporter Alex Sherman joins us as well on set. Mr. Boras, congratulations above all for negotiating this complicated and blockbuster deal.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to work for Juan Soto, and we're all quite honored by it.
Well, let me ask you this. There was another deal on the table from the crosstown rivals, the New York Yankees. What was it? What were the one or two things that differentiated and caused Juan Soto to choose the Mets over the Yankees? Because the difference in face value of the deal, as reported, was only something like $5 million or thereabouts over a period of 10 to 15 years. So I can't imagine it was only the money. What was it?
I think the perception here is really kind of misstated. This was about multiple teams, and the totality of Juan's decision involved far more than one other team in New York. I mean, I think Juan has great respect for the Yankees. They're a tremendous organization, and in every way did everything to illustrate to Juan in this process, as did other teams, that they really coveted who he was as a player, what he meant to a franchise, current and long term. This decision wasn't about one other team. It was about multiple teams where Juan and his family had to sit down and make a decision over them.
So quite right. I mean, we hear reported Toronto, Los Angeles, Boston were among the other teams involved. But I'm having a hard time figuring out what you're trying to say here, that it had to do with other teams. In what sense, then? I mean, I don't. It sounds like you're being elliptical.
I think when you're an athlete, when you're an athlete, you think about all things, but you primarily also think about your routine, your performance, your family, in addition to the economics. You know, Juan Soto's performance levels in Citi Field are well known to him, and he plays at the highest level of his we have a baseball term called OPS. He plays at the highest levels of performance. And players think about execution. They also think about ownership and winning, not only in the current but the long term, because the deal's so long. You think about the impact on your family. You think about all these factors. And when you're given the privilege of having so many teams offer you opportunities that are, as it turned out, we're in a range of record-setting contracts, you look at the internal aspect of that, where you say, I have to execute, I want to win, I want to know my ownership, what does my family feel about this decision? So there's vastly more things that you think about other than economics.
That's very interesting. I think we just learned something, and particularly, and you're famous for this, by the way, for assembling a package of statistics and analytics that make the case. And you just said that one of the variables here, or the important decision points, was how he performs at Citi Field. Alex, jump in.
Yeah, the size of this deal, Scott, is so massive. I'm curious, you speak to executives and owners around the league. Is there a sense that you feel of a growing discontent among some of the owners and executives from a parity standpoint, that these deals are just too out of whack right now? We've got the CBA coming up in 2026. Do you sense that there may be some motion toward trying to push for a lockout and a salary cap?
No, and I'll tell you why. That we've experienced this many, many times in the traditions of baseball, is that these teams are well studied. They're very well versed. When there is something that of value in the marketplace that you have a rare opportunity to acquire, where we have an element in the sport called surplus value, where there has never been a player who has had a surplus value that exceeds well over $1 billion. And each team knew that this asset, this benefit to a franchise, was something that was not going to be available for years to come. And there's a rarity to this. I call Juan a centurion. And he's one of the few players that in a century meet the mark of performance, value at such a young age. So this is really about good business decisions. And you can see that from the fact that when we started, there were close to half the league wanted to participate in this. And we reduced that. And in the end, we had difficulty reducing the numbers because so many teams were seeking this rare value, because in the end, it was just good business.
Let me bring in Chris
acquire.
Grisanti with a question.
Scott, looking at it from a market perspective, you and your client basically just climbed Mount Everest of professional sports. So my question, you got Bitcoin hitting 100,000. You have other symbols of what I frankly would call excess. But do you think you'll plant your flag and this will stay there as the record for 5 or 10 years? Or do you think we're on the way to more contracts like this?
Great question. And I think we have historical models that give us an example of this. I remember when I did Alex Rodriguez's contract back in 2000, his 252 number exceeded all sports by far, a doubling. And everyone asked the same questions. You can view it as ownership saying there's rarity in every business. There's rarity certainly in sport. This certainly creates an umbrella as to how those aspire to really climb to the shade that umbrella provides. It was a very slow process. In A-Rod's case, he himself, after 7 years, when I did the contract with the Yankees the second time, only he ellipsed the mark that he had made. And I think it was well over a decade before someone came to those levels.
You know, Scott,
the rarity of skill and the youth really make these things something.
One difference, though, I see between A-Rod and today, and it's going to become more of an issue in the years to come, is that the regional sports network model is crumbling. And that's going to affect the revenue that's coming in for quite a few of these major league teams. Maybe it won't affect the billionaire Steve Cohen's out there, but it's going to affect a bunch of them. Do you feel like that may have downward pressure on some of these salaries?
You know, Alex, when you are the product and the product is coveted, and there is demand for the product, as there is in sport, it's the ultimate mystery. The production costs of it it's so minimal. So the reality of it is how it's distributed and the cost or value of it in negotiation is something that is the issue. It's not the value of the content or the product. So sport is very stable. It's recession-proof. We watch it, we demand it, we have a historical equivalent for it here. And so the product is not in any way in question. It's merely how we create a value structure and a process to determine its distribution, and how the owners, the union, and everyone involved in the sport really create methods to optimize how they take the product and the content and market it. That, I think, will answer all questions, because we know historically that this is a coveted medium and it's an exciting medium. And for those of us who spent our life in the game, we see promise and we see extraordinary talent and we see the true mystery of the game beholding to audiences that really covet to watch it.
Scott Boras, thank you for your time. Arguably no one understands baseball and the business of baseball better than you do. Thank you for your time today, Scott Boras.